Welcome to another edition of Walter Butler Motivation. Today we're going to talk about the concept of death ground. As the name implies, death ground is a military concept, a war concept that can be applied in our lives, in everyday, ordinary lives. Now, to illustrate this concept, we're going to tell a couple of stories. So the first story is about the atheist and the bear. One day, an avowed atheist was out walking in nature, marveling at everything that evolution had created. The birds, the trees, the ground, the rivers, the forest. He was just amazed at it all. As he continued his walk, he began walking into a steep valley. After a little while, he heard a rustling noise behind him, and he turned and he looked. And there he saw an 8-foot mama grizzly bear with her 4 cubs. Well, this startled the man so much that he began running into the deep valley quicker and making much noise. The bears, they heard this noise and they saw the man, and the mama bear, knowing that the valley, that steep valley, ended in a dead end, began to stalk the man down slowly. Well, sure enough, the man came to the end of the valley, and he turned around and he looked at the bears and recognized the situation that he was in. And for the first time in his life, he fell to his knees and cried out, "God, please help me." And at that moment, the trees, the wind stopped blowing, the trees stopped moving, the rivers froze, and a bright light shone from heaven. And from this bright light, a voice boomed, "You deny my existence all these years, tell other people that I don't exist. You credit creation as nothing more than a cosmic accident, and now you want me to help you in this situation?" Well, the atheist looked up and said, "I can't expect you to treat me like a Christian after all these years, but perhaps you could turn the bear into a Christian." God considered it and said, "Very well." The trees began waving again, the rivers began flowing, the light went away. So the man looked up at the bear, the mama bear. And at that time, the mama bear put her paws together and said, "Lord, for this meal that we are about to receive, we are truly thankful." Well, it didn't work out the way the man wanted it. And as it turned out, the man was on death ground. He had to fight, get through the mama bear, or die, one or the other. I'm not sure how the story turned out, although I can figure out it probably didn't turn out too well for that man. But this military concept, this concept is very powerful. Take, for example, another example of marriage. Men, when you're out with your wives and they're shopping for a new outfit, she goes into the dressing room, she comes out all proud and she says, "How do you like this outfit? Does it make me look fat?" Men, consider yourself on death ground at that point, because you only have one answer, one way out, and that one answer is, "No, honey, it doesn't make you look fat." Men, consider yourself warned. That is death ground. Now, in most situations, dangerous or stressful situations, the natural human reaction is to fight or flight. Death ground, however, takes away the option of flight. You have to fight. You have to fight or you die. Another story illustrates this concept of death ground. Cortez, you may have heard of him, was a man in the Spanish army that lived back in 1519. He was on the island of Cuba in the Cuban government, and he was an up-and-coming politician. Well, the boss of Cortez wanted to get rid of Cortez because he was a political rival. A few months back, they had sent some soldiers down to their Mexican province, and, well, those soldiers hadn't come back. So the boss of Cortez decided to send Cortez down there with a couple hundred more soldiers, put some spies on the boat, and make sure that Cortez didn't come back either. Now, back then, Mexico was a very unfriendly place to be. It was dangerous in those days because they had something called Aztecs. And you didn't mess with Aztecs because Aztecs would eat you. We have our share of problems here in modern life, but that's one thing we haven't had to deal with. We didn't have to deal with possibly being on the dinner menu. We didn't have to deal with the possibility of being eaten. So away Cortez went with his couple hundred soldiers, the spies on board. Well, the spies, they riled up the rest of the crew, and by the time they got to Mexico, it was almost mutiny. Cortez and his senior officers got together. What do? They had 6 ships. Do we go back to Cuba, or do we continue on with our mission? And they decided, we're going to sink 5 of these ships. We're going to leave 1 ship afloat so they can go back to Cuba, whoever doesn't want to go with us. They got up the next morning. Everyone was standing around saying, hey, what happened to our ships? Well, Cortez told them, we sunk the 5. Those of you that are cowards can get on the 6th and go back to Cuba, but the rest of us, we're going to go on. We're going to conquer Mexico, conquer the Aztecs, and that's what they did. He sunk the ships. He put them on death ground. There's no way to get through but fighting. Now, the conquest of the Aztecs and the brutality and the bloodshed, that's nothing to be wished, but the example, the motivation example, is extremely powerful, and that is the example of being on death ground. I'm not asking you to go to war, but put yourself on death ground, a minor version of it. Cut off your escape, cut off your ability to quit, and see what happens. See how incredibly motivating this can be. I hope these 2 stories helped you to understand what death ground is. Put yourself on death ground. Don't put yourself in harm's way, but utilize this concept and see how far it'll get you. Keep your feet on the ground and your mind shooting to the stars. Have a good day. Bye-bye.